From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Good morning, security gang. Welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast. Great to be with all of y'all this morning, Tuesday, November 12th, 2024. I'm obviously not in my natural environment. I'm not in the studio. I've had to travel, and so is life. When you're a practitioner, you're a CISO, you are often spending time on the road. But nonetheless, happy to be with all y'all this morning. We've got a packed show, so let's get the ball rolling. Obviously, traveling, got in really late yesterday. I haven't yet identified a coffee spot, although I looked, but I'm like way out somewhere. And so I just want to say the following, like I'm way out somewhere. So just let's put it at that. Way out somewhere. Haven't found a coffee spot yet. Hopefully I will for tomorrow morning show. But for all y'all joining us for the Coffee Cup Cheers, tradition sticks around even when I don't have it. Coffee Cup Cheers, y'all. Now let's go ahead and get started. This was a story I needed to do yesterday, and I completely missed it as I was getting ready for the show. But the Salt Typhoon attack on the public telecom systems continues to complex itself more and more and more. A federal agency has now issued a directive to employees to reduce use of their phones for work matters because of the recent attack on the telecom infrastructure, according to people familiar with the matter. Now, again, here's the thing about this specific attack, folks. All the information that's coming out is anonymous. All the information that's coming out is primarily behind the Wall Street Journal kind of reporting it based on that. I've seen a few cyber publications kind of really start to talk about this, but predominantly more in the fact that the Congress is now calling for a special investigation and are calling some of the people in to behind closed doors to brief the Congress on exactly the scope and scale of this attack. But this attack does go all the way, according to sources, to President Trump. So, and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance. So do not conduct, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has said, do not conduct work while using mobile voice calls or text messages. They're referencing, well, there's no evidence that have been targeted. We ask for your compliance with these directives as will reduce the risk that we will be compromised. The alert is the latest demonstration of concerns within the federal government about the scale and scope of this specific attack by Salt Typhoon, which is a Chinese APT. The attackers have said to compromise data about calls and in some cases even recorded phone audio from certain high-value targets, including individuals affiliated with both the President-elect Trump's campaign and Vice President Harris's presidential campaign. It wasn't clear if other federal agencies had taken similar measures, although the people I've spoken with about the attack on condition of anonymity have said that there's clear directives around not using like the traditional messaging apps, not using traditional calls on their devices, potentially looking for encrypted solutions of how to get that communication across, as well as even updating and kind of changing the way they communicate all together. So the access that the attackers have allowed them to scope out call logs, unencrypted text messages, some audio from potentially thousands of Americans, including the US wiretap system. This breach continues to keep inquiring minds. And once it's actually released, we'll actually understand the scope of it. At the moment, it's still just the Wall Street Journal really kind of going through this. CISA has not responded to any requests for comments. No one in the federal agency has confirmed nor denied that this hack has taken place. And China, for their end, have said, we don't know what you're talking about. But of course, that's what China would do. So there's that. Halliburton, which experienced a cybersecurity incident back in August of 22nd of this year, one of the largest oil field service providers, have now said that the cost of the RansomHub ransomware attack on Halliburton has reached $35 million. Halliburton has yet to confirm the incident was a ransomware attack, but its brief description suggests it is, and RansomHub did kind of put out and say, like, hey, we're likely the people behind the attack. The company's financial report for the third quarter reveals that the expenses related to the attack reached $35 million. They experienced a 2-cent per share impacted or adjusted earnings from lost or delayed revenue due to the cybersecurity event and storms in the Gulf of Mexico. Their full year expectation for free cash flow and cash returns to shareholders remains unchanged. So all in all, 35 million is one thing. We talked about Microchip just late last week. The cost of their breach was 21.4 million so far. And again, these are so far. My expectation is for Halliburton, this is probably going to reach anywhere in the north of 50 to 60 million dollars. And for Microchip, my guess is it's probably going to be around the $30 million range. And the reason I say that is because when you slow down production, when you slow down output, it's not turn it on and it's back there. It takes a really long time to get back in the rhythm. And if you don't believe me, just look post-COVID, how long it took for some restaurants to get in the rhythm, how long it took for a lot of businesses that were kind of on rhythm. Everything was working pre-COVID, then shutdown came, and then they were shut down. And then when they came back, they had all these limitations and all these restrictions. And it took them a year or two to get back into the scope of things. And in some cases, some of them never got back to the same function as before. I know some places that used to be open till 8 o'clock that haven't gone back since COVID to 8, that they've stayed at 4. Part of it is because business has shifted. The other part of it is because they can't find that rhythm again. That rhythm just does not exist. So it takes time to get rhythm back up and running. No doubt these companies will be able to get their rhythm back up running, but it takes longer, typically a quarter or two. We saw what happened with Clorox. Clorox said it's going to be until the second quarter of this year when they went through their breach last year until they could pick back up production. It was nearly 6 months for them to get production back up to pre-attack levels. Again, it goes to the idea that once you're going through an attack, once you shut everything down, it takes a while to turn it back on. And it takes a while to get that rhythm and adjustment, the operational adjustments back up and going. Because once you shut things down, it takes a while to get that muscle memory back. So there's that. Ahold Delhaize said on Friday that it detected a cybersecurity issue within their U.S. network. The Hanford e-commerce service remained unavailable Monday morning, continuing an outage that began last week. Websites operated by the food provider Ahold Delhaize and other U.S. banners appeared to be operating normally after displaying warnings about potential disruptions. They said all of their U.S. stores were open, but that the IT problems have affected some pharmacies and e-commerce functions. They're remaining tight-lipped about the extent of the issue, which hit just weeks away from the start of the winter holidays in the U.S., a busy period for grocery chains. Traditionally, as people start to rev up for holiday parties and obviously getting ready for holidays this year. On Friday, Hannaford posted on Instagram that it canceled pickup and delivery orders that day as associates could not view orders placed due to the cyber attack. Most of the chain's pharmacy were processing prescriptions, but some may be unable to accept phone calls. The chain's stores remained open, with most accepting all forms of payment, including credit cards. And again, we talked about this yesterday with the attack on Israel, right? Every business that accepts payments should have a backup method. You need to have a backup method. You've got to have a backup systems. In banking, every bank has a primary banking operation platform, and they've got a secondary. That's the requirement for banks of a specific size, right? You've got to have two, and they can't be the same. Meaning, if you've got vendor A, you got to have vendor B on the other side. And now that you've got, and for the bank, you've got to integrate all the data so that vendor A and vendor B and the user experience is the same. It's identical for everyone alike. And so if there's an attack on one or there's an outage at one, you can turn on the second one and continue to keep the financial system operating. The same applies when your business relies heavily on payments. It seems to be that we always kind of take one form of payment, meaning one payment provider, and we don't use anyone else. But you ought to have a backup. You ought to have a backup. That's the first lesson in resiliency when it comes to this kind of stuff. You got to have a backup. Now, these guys, the website for Giant Food, Stop and Shop, and the Giant Company and Food Line each posted identical loads. They're all owned by this same parent company. So we'll see what happens there. But all in all, it's unclear how the cybersecurity impacted their e-commerce sales. So we'll see there as well. We'll keep you appraised to that. Have I Been Pawned is warning that the alleged data breach exposed the personal information of almost 57 million people, 56,904,909, for Hot Topic, Box Lunch, and Torrid customers. Hot Topic, the American retailer that's still in some malls across the country, specializes in counterculture-related clothing, accessories, and licensed music merchandise. The company has 640 stores across the U.S. and Canada, primarily located in shopping mall. It's kind of like its own cult. For those who don't know Hot Topic is kind of its own cult. Well, nonetheless, this data breach exposed full names, email addresses, dates of birth, phone numbers, physical addresses, purchase history, and partial credit card data for Hot Topic, Box Lunch, and Torrid customers. The security incident was initially claimed on breach forums by a threat actor named Titanic, which kind of meets the theme of the store. On October 21st of this year, the threat actor claimed to have stolen 350 million user records from Hot Topic, although their investigation so far only shows 56,904,909. He was trying to sell the database for $20,000 while also demanding a ransom payment of $100,000 from Hot Topic to remove the listing from there as well. The FBI is issuing a warning and an alert to U.S.-based companies and law enforcement agencies that threat actors are sending fake emergency data requests with the goal of harvesting PII. The emergency data request enables law enforcement agencies to obtain information from online service providers in emergency situations where there is no time to get a subpoena. The emergency data requests have been abused by the Lapsus security gang, as well as other threat actors, but FBI has observed a spike in cybercrime forum posts related to the process of emergency data requests. Cyber criminals are likely gaining access to compromised U.S. and foreign government email addresses and using them to conduct fraudulent emergency data requests to U.S.-based companies, exposing the PII of customers to further use for criminal purposes. In August, the agency said a known cyber criminal put up for sale an online form of a .gov email addresses, including U.S. credentials, claiming they could be used for espionage, social engineering, extortion, and data request. One tip I will give you: whenever I get an email from someone like FBI.gov or whatever, pick up the phone, call them. Their signature's always going to have a name and a phone number on there. You can do that. You can look them up on LinkedIn. If they are part of a cyber unit, they're typically always available on LinkedIn. So you can do that, or you can also call your local FBI field office and validate that as well. Sounds like a pain in the back end, and it is, but unfortunately, in the world we live in today, nothing replaces phone communications. If you haven't signed up for our Substack, please make sure to do so right now. jamesazar.substack.com. You can find all the latest, including our Saturday article, our Saturday morning articles. This week, we talked about what to expect in cybersecurity from a second Trump presidency. We kind of highlight all the various challenges that exist from China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia to federal data privacy regulation and federal data breach notification. So we talk all about that and more there. jamesazar.substack.com. It's free to sign up, and you also get this podcast and the written version of it with all the takeaways available there for absolutely free. Let's get into some vulnerabilities that need to be patched. If you're a Hewlett-Packard Enterprise customer, security updates have been released to address multiple vulnerabilities in the Aruba networking access point products, including 2 critical bugs that could result in unauthenticated command injection. The flaws affect access points running instant AOS-8 and AOS-10, and that update is AOS-10.4.XX to 10.4.1.4 and below, and instant AOS 8.12 .0.2 and below, and 8.10.0.13 and below. The most severe of the 6 newly patched vulnerabilities is CVE 2024-42509er. It's got a CVSS score of 9.8, and CVE 2024-47460. That's got a CVSS score of 9.0. They're unauthenticated command injection flaws in the CLI service that could result in execution of arbitrary code. Security researchers uncovered 24 security flaws spanning 15 different machine learning related open source projects. These compromised vulnerabilities discovered both on the server and client side. Software supply chain firm JFrog said in an analysis published last week, the server side weakness would allow attackers to hijack important servers in the organization, such as machine learning model registries, databases, and pipelines. The vulnerabilities discovered in Weave, ZenML, DeepLake, Vana.ai, and Maj.ai have been broken down into broader subcategories that allow for remotely hijacking model registries, database frameworks, and taking over the pipelines. Several CVEs exist here, including CVE 2024-7340-6507, 5565, 45187, 45188, 45189er, and 45190. All of these impact those ML libraries. You want to make sure you address these ASAP, and you're identifying those risks within your software supply chain. Threat actors are exploiting the various ways that zip files combine multiple archives into one file as an anti-detection tactic in phishing attacks that could deliver a various Trojan malware strains, including the smoke loaders. They're abusing the structural flexibility of zip files through a technique known as concatenation, a method that involves appending multiple zip archives into a single file. At least this new research from Perception Point has found. The combined file appears as one archive that actually contains multiple central directories, each pointing to a different set of entries. The discrepancy in handling these zips allows attackers to evade detection tools by hiding malicious payloads in parts of the archive that some zip readers cannot and do not access altogether. That's according to Arthur Velabush, Windows internal engineer, and Pele Kabara, product marketing manager from Perception Point. So they're exploiting these zip files. You want to make sure to actually identify that. And again, this is another phishing vector that needs to be paid attention to. A coordinated IP spoofing attack attempted to disrupt the Tor anonymity network, according to the Tor project and relay operators. They said the attack started on October 20th when Tor directory authorities, the critical component responsible for managing and maintaining the list of Tor relays, started getting complaints alleging that their servers have been conducting port scanning. The unauthorized port scanning triggered automatic abuse complaints to ISPs, which resulted in some relays being taken offline. The attacker's intent seems to have been to disrupt the network and the project by getting those IPs on the block list with these unfounded complaints. It's unclear who's behind the attack. Threat actors working for a government whose citizens often use Tor to maybe bypass citizenship and to protect their privacy are the likely culprits. But all in all, that's now been identified and rectified. And finally, the U.S. Supreme Court will soon decide whether allowing a longstanding shareholder lawsuit against Meta's Facebook to proceed or to dismiss it, as the lawyers for the social media giants have asked. This is going back to the 2015 incident for Cambridge Analytica, which obtained Facebook user data from a third-party forum and used it to create granular profile for targeting users during political campaign. So news of the data misuse surfaced back in 2018 and provoked considerable concerns in the US and elsewhere over privacy. And this shows you Cambridge Analytica. When was the last time you talked about that, right? Still in court now. The Supreme Court is looking at whether or not to allow this lawsuit by the shareholders of Meta against Facebook to carry on. The shareholders are saying that was misleading. Facebook says, not really. This lawsuit should be dismissed altogether. It'd be interesting to see. That's it for our show this morning. We'll be back tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern, live here with all the latest and greatest. Until then, have a great rest of your day. And most importantly, y'all, stay cyber safe and make sure to subscribe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.